Our next speaker is California State Senator Marie Alvarado Gil, who was elected in 2022 and represents the counties of Alpine, Amador, Calaveras, El Dorado, my county, Madera, Mariposa, and many others as an independent leader in legislature. Senator Alvarado Gil is the chair of the Senate Human Services Committee and serves on several committees, including Ag, Business and Professional, Government Organization, Insurance, Military and Veterans, and she serves as the Senate liaison to the California Department of Education Advisory Commission on Special Education. In addition, she's the vice chair of the Rural Caucus and is active in the Problem Solvers Caucus, both common sense coalition for bipartisan and bicameral policymaking. Marie is a native California whose fondest memories of her childhood were spent in the classroom and summers visiting her extended family in Mexico. She grew up on farmland in the Bay Area and grind masa at her grandmother's tortilla factory in Jalisco as a teenager. Marie was the first female to go to college in her family. She attended UC Davis, raised 3 amazing children as a single parent in a rural Northern California while building a promising career in both the public and nonprofit sectors. Marie returned to college, earned bachelor's and also master's in public administration. Policy issues that she led in the Senate include resource equity for rural communities, wildfire relief for homeowners insurance, and protection for farms and water rights across the Central Valley. Senator Alvarado Gil's tough stance on crime and fiscally conservative voice of the supermajority has earned her the title of the Western Blue Dog. Marie lives in Amador County in Sierra Foothills. She and her husband, Caesar, are owners and principal at Studious Partners, an education consulting firm that represent charter school and other public institutions throughout the United States and Central America. Quite a spread. So without further ado, I give you Senator Alvarado Marie Gil. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was listening to that introduction and I was like, wow, I do a lot of things. I need to cut back a little bit. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first opportunity to address a statewide disability advisory council. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me, not only to your meeting, but to your last meeting of 2023. So what a gift. I have been following your work for quite some time, not only as a state legislator, but as a Californian. As a member of the community of people with disabilities, and also as an advocate for my own kids. I was blessed with 2 of my children with disabilities, and that's really what propelled me into working in public service, is not only being able to see their life through a parent's perspective, but also to be able to see the world through their eyes and through their experiences from a very young age. So thank you so much for having me. As you heard in my introduction, I do represent a variety of counties. 13 counties is probably about a fifth of our counties in California, predominantly rural counties and Central Valley. So you can imagine that there's a lot of diversity of opinions and thoughts in my community. But that represents California as a whole. So I take my role very responsibly. But I also know that I don't only serve my district, I represent all of California. And so as Bobby mentioned, my role on the Senate Human Services Committee, that I was appointed as a first-year legislator to do various things. One is to bring my experience as a member of the community of people with disabilities, but also to bring my experience as a child of the foster care system. So my parents were immigrants from Mexico at a very young age. They were teenagers when they came to this country, and they worked in the service industry. And very early on, my parents struggled to raise my brother and I, and that caused several social rifts within our home, everything from drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and ultimately sexual assault. So that was an environment that was very unsafe for me. So my environment, I disclosed what was happening to me in my environment in middle school, and that put me in the foster care system. To me, I looked at it as a blessing, as a gift, because it provided safety for me and ultimately gave me that opportunity to live with my grandmother in Mexico, which the foundation for my politics, for my community service, and ultimately for my career was born. She was the very first person in my life that I saw as a role model and a mentor that was related to me. So prior to that, it was my teachers at school that had helped to raise me, essentially. So coming back to the U.S. for me, I wanted to make sure that I gave back to the community. And my very first job in college was working at a neighborhood center in the city of Vacaville. And the children, unbeknownst to me, looked just like me when I was a kid, spoke the same language, and their parents were dealing with a lot of the same issues that my parents dealt with. And the common denominator that I saw between my parents and the families that I was working with was education and access to education. And so I remember my parents telling me that they came to the US because of the opportunities for their children, and that education would be that equalizer when it comes to breaking the cycle of poverty, breaking the cycle of abuse, and other social ills. What I didn't realize at the time was that public education was not created for everyone. Public education was created for those who could access the various modules, and kiddos with disabilities or for different abilities of learning were falling behind. So when I became a parent, I learned very quickly that my kids needed that voice. And it wasn't just my children, but it was the average of 16% of students in the public school system who relied on their parents, who relied on adults, who relied on state systems to advocate for them, albeit poorly sometimes, right? So that's what really got me involved in politics as a kind of a volunteer on various campaigns. I went on to lead several ballot initiative campaigns, as well as testify at the state level and ultimately serve on the Advisory Commission of Special Education. So one of the most coveted pieces of my work for me was getting involved in the charter school movement. So I talked a little bit of my kids. My oldest and my youngest are members of the community as well. And I didn't know anything about charter schools. I didn't know anything about alternates to public education outside of the traditional district school. But living in Northern California, I found a community of parents that were like-minded and wanted to do what was best for their kiddos. And that's what I started getting involved as a parent of organizing and opening charter schools. And so later in my career, when I had been established and understood the political navigations of charter schools, I was able to open the very first charter school for performing arts in Contra Costa County that served north of 20% of kiddos with disabilities. I felt very fortunate to be the chair of that charter school network and help to bring abilities awareness across the public education spectrum in California. So now serving as the senator, I bring those experiences, but also just my love and passion and commitment for California, to make California a place where I can see my grandkids grow up and be able to bring that legacy of family and hard work and humility to what we do in public service. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to questions that you have. I want to talk a little bit about some meaningful policy changes that have come across in our board. It's important for us to also look at how policy areas are impacting people on the ground, people who it impacts, because oftentimes at the level of legislature that I'm at now, we hope that the policies that we put forward do not have those negative impacts or do not have those ramifications, consequences that are unintended, that oftentimes we don't see until after the policy has been implemented. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how that's impacted you, and some suggestions that you may have for me to bring back as your voice. I also want to talk about the Senate Human Services Committee. So there are 5 of us that serve on this committee, and we are charged with reviewing policy that is presented from both the Assembly and the Senate to review for appropriateness, legality, implementation, and to ultimately craft that legislation, that policy into something that is practical and helps people. From there, it goes to the Human Services Committee that looks at whether or not our state can afford it. So oftentimes these are policies that are impactful, they're beneficial, but sometimes we are in a situation in California where there is a budget deficit, like this year. But what I tend to lay back on, what I tend to ground my feet in, is that accountability is not there's no cost to accountability. So having policy that helps to build that accountability and transparency is one of the challenges we have in California. But I like to consider myself that is one of the areas that I champion as the chair of the Senate Human Services Committee. So let me talk a little bit about what's next. So many of you are familiar with Assembly Bill 1179. Let me just bring that up. I'm sorry, 1195. This is the Assembly bill that aims to address the issues around parity, parity around disability inclusion in our state agencies. And we are looking at this year falling short of that goal. Our goal is 16.6%, and we have fallen short of that. And so that's why conversations like today are so important, because we want to talk about what's real. We want to talk in a way that's organic and impactful. I've never been a sugarcoater. I've always been a direct communicator. And I know many of you are on our advisory council because of your expertise and because of your ability to move the message across various obstacles. So thank you for doing that, and continue to bring your voice to today. Sorry, I'm being called on by my little one here. Let me move my camera so you know who she is. So this is Paris. She is my service dog. She has been trained very well. In my youth, I was a trained service dog teacher, and so when I had the ability to have my own service animals, I was very happy to do that. So I actually train pugs. You'll see many of them, not only as hi JJ. You'll see many of them on my website and Facebook, but they've been amazing. I got her through the pandemic, where many of my constituents, many Californians, really struggled with the impact of the pandemic. And she is trained to help with anxiety. And she triggered me, or she didn't trigger me, but she signaled as I was talking. So I think she sent some of my nervousness on the Zoom. So thank you, Paris, for doing your work. All right, let's get back on track here. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the bills that came through the Senate this year. We had 41 bills in 2023 that we saw in the Senate Human Services Committee. And the ones that we saw that included the impact specifically on people with disabilities was McKinner's bill, AB 1006. This was for the Aging and Disability Resource Connection Program, the No Wrong Door system. Senator Caballero's bill around older adults and adults with disabilities, the Housing Stability Act. Addis had Assembly Bill 1147, the Disability Equity and Accountability Act of 2023. This one is significant because we want to make sure that not only are we creating policy, but we're creating a foundation so that this policy can be enacted and be implemented with fidelity. So this is definitely going to be one of those bills that we're watching throughout its inception, and to ensure that the intent is both practical and that we're able to champion that. All right, and then last but not least, I just wanted to highlight Assembly Bill 248. This was Mathis's bill for individuals with disability. It was the Dignity for All Act. So again, not just putting forward rhetoric, but really putting forward impactful, passionate, and intentional policy that helps people in their lives and makes California a better place to live, not only for all people, but for people with different abilities. So I am going to close with my talk because I really want to have a conversation with all of you and engage in question and answer. So with the time that we have left, I'd love to do that and connect with all of you.
Thank you so much, Senator Alvarado Gil. That was excellent, informative presentation. I'm so glad, and we are so happy to meet your service dog, Paris.
Yes.
You certainly not only make us feel comfortable, the whole environment just changes, even on Zoom.
It does. It does.
So you did a great job of training that.
Yeah, she's really great. She's really great.
There was a question that came up, and Alan is going to ask that question. Alan, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask the senator question.
Okay. Thank you, Bobby. And Senator, thank you so much for your talk and sharing your story. I have two brief comments and then a question. One, I'm so glad you got involved in special ed. The special ed to prison pipeline is really real, I think. I should say that better. It does exist, and I'm so glad you're looking at changing that. Second, Governor Newsom vetoed a bill requiring that staff get 30 days notice before telework ends. I'd love to see that reintroduced. And then my main question is about the AWOL statute. I feel it's being abused against people with disabilities. Under the statute, if you're absent 5 days without leave, you could be AWOL separated. And what I found is when people are out of leave, the supervisor just denies them leave, and then after 5 days, they're separated. And I had one member who I helped. I helped her prepare a reasonable accommodation request for unpaid leave for that time. They denied it, and AWOL separated her. I made an argument at the Cal HR hearing that FEHA applies, and the department has to comply with FEHA, the Fair Employment Housing Act, when using the AWOL Act. And the judge says, no, I don't deal with that issue. I took it up on a writ, and the Superior Court says the judge is wrong. Departments need to comply with FEHA before complying with the AWOL statute. And I guess what I would love to see is a short amendment to the AWOL statute indicating that you have to comply with FEHA. I don't think it would change the statute at all. It would just clarify it for departments, for Cal HR, and for the Cal HR judge. That's my issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll say a little bit about this piece of policy. So, in California, we are very protective of our workforce. And oftentimes we see pieces of legislation that come through that we are there's good intentions behind there, but there is not always the understanding of how it impacts people with all abilities. And so particularly the AWOL leave, this one for me is one of those situations where we have to have a system that helps to facilitate the requirements. And so oftentimes, particularly for the community, different abilities community, I mean, yes, we have access to our doctors and we have open communication, but the system moves very slowly. And there is also the notion of privacy, right? We are in a society where we in the community are required to self-disclose the disability that we are working with. And it's not always a visible disability, right? And so it puts us in a position where we're having to disclose private information or personal information in a way that someone that is not part of the community does not have to do. And so when I look at legislation, I look at how does this impact people from all abilities? And is this one of those one size fits all intentions that has a negative impact or negative consequences? I do want to make sure that I introduce Erica Harnick, who is my lead on human services policy. She's here today with us. I know she's taking notes on your question and your comment. So please give us some time to take a look at it, and hopefully we can come back with some progression on where to go with this bill.
Thank you very much.
With this policy, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Cynthia has her hand up. Cynthia, go ahead, unmute, ask your question.
Thank you, Bobby, and good to see you again. So I just want to add on to what Alan was saying. This actually just happened to me this year. I went out for hip and knee surgery. My employer, the state, was aware that I was going to be out for an extensive period. When they did not hear from me, according to their dates, I was not looking at email. I was in recovery. Right. And they sent an email that I didn't respond to because I wasn't in my work email. And when I didn't respond, I literally had law enforcement knocking on my door, my neighbor's door, telling them my neighbors the situation of my medical and trying to find out where I was. I then found out from my neighbors, I had family taking care of me. My neighbors called me because they have my number and said the police was looking for you. The other thing is they also forced me to disclose medical information to my manager in order to extend my medical leave on multiple occasions. And even though I got my union rep involved and said I wasn't comfortable, in order to receive approval for extension that from a doctor's note I already had extending me, I was forced to still disclose my medical condition to receive that approval from my manager. So I just want that to tack on to what Alan was saying. When you guys do this, and Alan and Senator and Bobby, if you do move forward with this, I would love to assist in that process because I was very offended. I was put into a corner. My coworkers look at me different now. I've lost my respect at work. There's so much that has changed within my employment that I've applied for 4 jobs and cannot promote in a position that I've been in over 4 years. So since this has happened. So I would love to assist in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia, I'm so sorry that you experienced that as a state worker. I know that we have a long way to go to ensure that people with all abilities have equal treatment. Even though we have anti-discrimination laws, it's not enough. We have to be able to create those safeguards so that those who are not part of the community, those that do not have to experience the constant scrutiny of explaining why we ask for accommodations or why we need different tools or timetables or just understanding so that we can do our jobs or we can perform at our best. It is somewhat of not only intrusive, but there's a nakedness about it. There's a nakedness in that not only we as individuals are dealing with our different abilities, but we're also having to expose that to others as part of our identity. And this is part of what we fight with around our civil rights laws and our civil rights actions. And, the disability rights community has been doing an amazing job over the past decades. Certainly, what I've seen in my decades of experience. And we have a long way to go, right? We have a long way to go because, again, we are a part of a population that is a minority. And in that minority, it means that not only do we have to be vocal and organized, but we have to be specific. And it's that specific specificity which people with able bodies are not being asked to do that, right? And so this is for me that inadvertently discriminatory action. And much like you, Cynthia, I have found myself in many situations with my employers that they say under the law, well, I'm not allowed to ask you about your medical condition, but how come you cannot do this? And when you talk about not only diseases, disorders, and illnesses, but you talk about mobility, you talk about pain levels, you talk about anxiety levels and mental health. I mean, those are all protected under discrimination law. But in order to communicate your needs in these situations, we are forced to do that. And the policy should be protective, not create these loopholes which take our dignity and respect out of the workforce. So thank you for sharing your story, Cynthia.
Senator, there are a lot of good questions brought up, and you covered quite a bit of the bills that you mentioned. One of those of a concern to us is AB 1195. That bill passed, and that's a good bill. There are a lot of tools available to implement and mitigate the effect of the low disability parity rate in state service. It's dismally low. It's been going down for the last 5 years. And that's a huge concern to us. But we would like to talk to you about addressing that problem by implementation of the statutes and bills that's already enacted and in force. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of time here, but we want to connect with your legislative director and speak to you separately on that matter. But one of the questions that came up is of a concern to all of us. As you know, the budget is dismally deficient, some billions of dollars, 68 or something. Recently, one of the attendees asked the question that there's been issued general salary increases by the state controller's office. Are they going to be affected by the budget deficit? Yes or no is what she wants to know, if you know the answer to the question.
Yeah, so that one, I don't know the answer to that question. So, unfortunately, communication is not a strong suit between the executive branch and the legislative branch. I learned of the excess budget deficit, just like all my constituents did, by reading the headline in the news. And so that is the extent of the communication that I've received as a state senator, which further underscores the problem, right? There should not be that disconnect between our elected officials and information, right? We should have that information so that we can address questions like this that come up in our constituents, with our constituents. And we simply have not been given that. I do anticipate coming back to session in January, early January, that we will have a caucus conversation around the budget and what this potentially looks like. And so I know that many of my colleagues are very good communicators with their constituents. So no matter where you live, whether you live in Senate District 4 or other places in California, I'm confident that my colleagues will help to communicate some of these pieces. The other thing that I would suggest is that we stay connected, Bobby, that you and my team stay connected, that it not be just a once of the year conversation that we have, but that we work together in coalition around these bills. I do want to also just highlight the work of a former Assembly member, Christina Garcia. She did put forward Assembly Bill 313, which was a cleanup bill to ensure that we not only have policy that sounds good and feels good, but actually is being implemented. So that would ensure that it put a requirement in for our state agencies to develop that reasonable accommodation plan and bring that plan to the legislature. So there's the accountability. And again, accountability doesn't cost money, but we do have to hold our state agencies accountable for what policies we put forward from the state legislature and to right their wrongs.
Yes. And I believe CalHR issued a model reasonable accommodation policy as a guide to all the departments to follow. I think you said accurately, the problem lies in implementation,
Right.
not the policy or the regulation. And the accountability comes with holding people accountable for all these implementation issues and showing the results. If the results are not there, then obviously there's a deficit in the chain of accountability. And
Right.
I'm glad that you're recognizing that, and we'll be happy to engage with your office and discuss these matters. And thank you again for being here and sharing your experience. Are there any additional questions before we let Senator Alvarado Gil leave this presentation? Or you're welcome to stay on your wealth of information.
Thank you. Bobby, I will say this, if Erica has not already put our contact information in the chat, she will do that. Our Senate Human Services Committee meets regularly, and there's multiple opportunities for public comment, both through phones and in person. You can always reach out to my office as well. You know, we serve you. If you do not live in my district, oftentimes I will review it and then I will forward your communication to the to my colleague. However, you can communicate directly with the Senate committee, and our team serves all of California. So thank you, Erica, for being here today also to help support me and be my hands and my ears.
Well, thank you, Senator. Well, good news is I live in your district, so you'll be hearing from me.
Yes, I know, Bobby. Happy to have you.
Well, thank you again, and happy holidays. Thanks for being here. It's a great presentation. If there are any follow-up question, I'll channel that to Erica and go through your office.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, you all have a great holiday and a great new year. Look forward to us continuing the conversation.
Great. Thanks a lot.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.